Please be seated. The record will show the jury has left the courtroom. Ms. Wilmot, the images on the screen.
Mr. Newmeister's going to do that.
Thank you. Yeah. Yes. Ms. Arias, you may come forward and take a seat, please. All right, you can line the jury up. Line up the jury. Please be seated. The record will show the presence of the jury, the defendant, and all counsel. Mr. Nurmi,
I believe Ms. Harris needs to be sworn.
calling your client.
Yes, the defense calls Jodi Arias.
Ms. Arias, please stand to be sworn.
Raise your right hand. You do solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Yes, I do.
Please be seated. You may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. Hi, Jodi.
Hi.
How are you feeling right now?
Nervous.
I want to ask you, well, let me ask you this. Is this a position you ever thought you would find yourself in, testifying here today?
The objection.
Relevance.
Approach, please.
Let me ask you a couple of important questions before we get back and start talking about who you are and why you're here, okay?
Okay.
Did you kill Travis Alexander on June 4th, 2008?
Yes, I did.
Why?
The simple answer is that he attacked me, and I defended myself.
Okay. It was also brought up during these proceedings that you gave an interview with Inside Edition. Do you remember seeing that tape?
Yes, I do.
And in that tape you said that no jury would convict you. Something to that effect. Do you remember seeing that? Remember saying that?
Yeah, I did say that.
Why?
I made that statement in September 2008, I believe it was. And at the time I had plans to commit suicide. So I was extremely confident that no jury would convict me because I didn't expect any of you to be here. I didn't expect to be here, so I could have easily said no jury would acquit me either. I couldn't say that though because there was an officer sitting 5 feet behind me, and had I told them the reason no jury would convict me at that time, I would have been thrown into a padded cell and stripped down, and that would have been my life for a while until I stabilized. So I was very confident that no jury would convict me because I planned to be dead. Probably the most bitter words I'll ever eat.
I'm sorry, what was that?
I said those are probably the most bitter words I'll ever eat.
Ms. Arias, I want to clarify another thing as well when we're talking here. Your name has been pronounced in most of this trial, Arias. Is there another way of pronouncing it? Have you always pronounced it Arias?
I've heard it pronounced about 7 different ways. I say Arias, as does the rest of my family.
Okay. Well, let's back up a little bit and then talk about your family. Who's in your immediate family?
My immediate family consists of...
Relevance.
I'm the oldest of my parents. They also had another son about 2 years after I was born, my brother. And then I have another younger sister and another younger brother. I also have an older sister from a previous marriage of my father's.
Okay. So let me see if well, first of all, what are the names of your parents?
Bill and Sandy Arias.
Okay. And are they still married at this time?
Yes, about 33 years.
Okay. And you said you were the oldest child of Bill and Sandy, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And you have a half-sister that is older than you, is that right?
Yes, she's 5 years older than me.
Okay. And that is your father's daughter?
Yes, from a previous marriage.
Okay. And you have a brother that's 2 years younger than you, right?
Yes.
Okay. And what is his name?
His name is Carl.
And you mentioned I believe the next youngest would have been another sister. What was her name?
Angela.
Okay. And your youngest brother, who is he?
Joseph.
Okay. And just so we get a bit of separation, how much younger than you is Angela?
Angela was born when I was 11, and Joseph was born when I was 13.
And what year were you born?
1980.
Do you remember where you grew up?
Yeah, I grew up in a few different cities. I was born in Salinas, California, and I lived there until I was almost 12.
Okay. And what was life like in Salinas?
For the first years of my life, it was really good.
When you say that, before you continue, let's clarify. What do you mean by first years?
I would say until about age 7, it was a fairly ideal childhood.
Okay, different people have different meanings when they say ideal, so why don't you describe for us what you mean by ideal childhood?
I have predominantly positive memories of my childhood at that time. My brother and I lived when I was about 4 years old, we moved to a house in a cul-de-sac. We had the center lot, so it was a huge backyard, and we had a lot of places to play there. There were trees to climb. There were other kids in the neighborhood and in the cul-de-sac that we played with. We were close in age, so my family traveled a lot. We went camping. We went to all the theme parks in California.
Did you go to school?
Of course, yes, I went to school.
And you went to grade school in Salinas then?
Yes, I went to a private school for about 3 years and then a public school.
Were you and Carl in school together, or did you go to different schools?
We were in school together. I was held back in kindergarten, so even though we're 2 years apart, he was only 1 grade behind me.
And tell us about your parents at that time, to your recollection. Were they both working? Was your mom at home? Tell us about that.
Yeah, when I was younger, I remember my mom used to work. I guess she was working as a server with my dad. He owned restaurants my whole life. And then when I was around 11 or 12, she became a dental assistant.
Okay. And you mentioned your life was... Well, let me ask you a question. Do you remember what your interests were as a child?
Yes, I had pets, cats, dog, fish. I had a rat. I loved animals. We had a lot of pets. My brother had frogs, things like that. We played a lot of hopscotch and two-square when we were younger. We went roller skating. They didn't really have rollerblades yet, or at least that we used. We rode bikes a lot. We did a lot of camping. I'm sorry, I kind of forgot the question.
All right. Well, you're speaking very quietly. Are you nervous today?
Yeah. Yes, I am.
What's that?
Yes.
Okay.
Very nervous.
Could you do me a favor and pull the mic a little closer to you? Jodi, one of the things that you said a couple questions ago when we were speaking is that your life was pretty ideal up until about age 7. Is something different after age 7, or?
It seemed like, my parents would just, spank us or hit us as discipline, so it seemed like at age 7, around then, it started getting a little bit more intense. That's something I remember.
Okay. You said they started spanking you.
Well, I was spanked before on occasion. Just it seemed like the frequency and the intensity of it increased around that age.
What do you mean by that, frequency and intensity?
Well, just there were, I think that's the first year my dad started using a belt. My mom began to carry a wooden spoon in her purse.
Objection, relevance.
Sustained.
May we approach?
You may.
I don't know if she went to school with or knew another woman about her age who had a daughter my age that was going into high school as well. So we hung out a little bit during the summer, so I knew her and her sister, but that was it.
Just a couple of people.
Yes.
Now, you mentioned when you moved to, based on what you told us before, we correct an understanding that the beatings and the pushing of the furniture, that sort of thing with your dad continued throughout your high school years.
Yes.
Were those the incidents you were talking about before, about being pushed into the post and the furniture, or were there other incidents?
That happened when I was in high school. There were a few things that happened right before we moved. A bunch of friends and I one night decided, like the last night I was there, we decided to sneak out of the house and hang out. And my parents woke up and found out. So when I came back, my dad asked where I had been, and I had fallen asleep. He woke me up around 6, and so when I sat up and I was disoriented because I had been sleeping. So I didn't give him a satisfactory answer, so he hit me across the face, and I fell back down, and then he sat me back up and asked me again, and I didn't give him a satisfactory answer, so he hit me across the face again, and I fell down again.
When you say he hit you across the face, did he punch you?
No, it was an open-handed, hard slap.
Do you recall, did you bleed?
No, I didn't. Not that I recall.
Did you bruise?
Not that I recall.
Did it hurt?
Yes.
Just so we can clarify as well, your dad's a pretty big guy, right?
He was very big at that time. His health he's frail now, but he was very big at the time.
Can you give us an idea of how tall and how much he weighed at that time?
I don't know his weight, but he's about 5'11". He used to bench press 520 pounds. He was a really big guy for a while.
You said he used to bench press 500-something pounds.
520, yes.
Was that a hobby of his, weightlifting, or can you describe that for us?
Yes, he was very much into weightlifting. He had, I guess it was like a Bowflex machine at home. I think it was called Soloflex. It was one from like the 80s. But he would use that a lot to work out. He was into martial arts. We watched a lot of movies like that. Things like that. He went to the gym frequently.
To your knowledge, was your mom aware, I know you mentioned the one incident where your mom was present, was your mom aware of your dad beating you?
Well, when she was present, yes, of course. Sometimes we were on road trips together, and they would take turns if they, had to pull the car over or something. Not that it happened several times in one trip, but I remember it being both my mom and my dad punishing me in the presence of each other. And I don't know, when she was gone, I assumed they would talk about it.
Okay. We talked a little bit about your dad during high school and your mom with the wooden spoon. In your younger years, did your mom's beatings with the wooden spoon, did they continue in high school as well?
They continued for a short time, but I think as I turned 16, 17, I don't recall her carrying the wooden spoon around. She would just start grabbing whatever was available, like a hairbrush, or she had acrylic nails, so sometimes she would grab me and dig her nails into my skin, things like that.
Okay. In high school, what were some of your interests?
In high school, I was very interested in learning Spanish, so I took that all throughout high school and middle school. I was getting into art. I was excited to get my driver's license. I traveled abroad to Costa Rica to learn Spanish better. I had a few friends. I didn't really make a lot of close friends like I had before. It just seemed like I was constantly making friends and then we were moving away. So,
She was asking her interests.
Sustained.
Did you have a lot of friends in high school?
I had a large circle of friends, but nobody I was very close with.
Would I be correct in assuming that your interest in art by the time you're in high school moved beyond the Crayola crayon phase?
Yeah, very much so.
Tell us about that.
I was at my grandmother's house one day, and she had an old set of oil paint, and I knew what oil paint was. I'd never worked in that medium before, so I didn't know what I was doing. I just took a piece of printer paper and started painting oil paint on this paper, and oil began to spread around the paint. So I figured, okay, that's not going to work. So I went to Michael's, the arts and crafts store, and bought some supplies and began to experiment with that, and started painting.
And did you work during high school?
I did. My dad owned a restaurant at the north end of town. It's now a Mexican restaurant, but he owned it then, and I would work as a server there from the time I was a freshman on through, I think, 96 or 7 when he closed it.
So you started working in 9th grade. How old were you in 9th grade?
In 9th grade, I was 15.
And was there a certain amount of days you worked while you were in high school?
He put me on a few afternoons and the weekends.
Okay. Did you graduate high school?
No, I didn't.
Why didn't you graduate high school?
At the time, about 3 months, well, it's kind of complicated.
Okay. Well, let's talk about it. Did you drop out of high school?
Yes, I did.
Where were you living at the time you dropped out of high school?
I was living with my boyfriend at the time, about a little town 6 miles outside of Wairika.
Let's break that. Why did you leave? Prior to that, were you living with your parents?
Yes.
Okay. Why did you leave your parents' home to go live with your boyfriend?
I was kind of becoming tired of the discipline, and I was 3 months until I was 18, and one day they decided to ground me until I was 18 because I skipped one period in high school because there was a final for I was taking a college history class, U.S. history, and I didn't feel like I had adequately studied for the exam, so I skipped that period to study for the exam, and decided I would make it up the next day. So I parked my car in the parking lot of Rite Aid and just cracked open the book, and I was studying it for that hour. And my dad, somehow he found me. It's a small town, so I guess the school notified him that I wasn't present for that class, so he found me, and at that point they didn't use physical discipline that day, but I was grounded till I was 18, so I couldn't fathom being grounded for 3 months. When you were grounded in my house, it meant no phone, no TV, no friends, no social functions of any kind. You're in your room, period. So
let me ask you this. This would have been towards the end of your senior year in high school, or was this at the end of your
yeah, it was in May, I think.
Okay, so of your senior year or of your junior year?
Maybe April. My junior year,
Okay.
yes.
So you dropped out of high school before you finished your junior year? Is that right?
No, I did finish the junior year, mostly with D's and F's, because toward the end of the year, I just let it all fall apart.
You mentioned discipline. You talked about grounding. Was there any particular physical incident or an incident of abuse that motivated you to leave your parents' home?
The incident I described where I was knocked against, I called it a doorpost, I guess it's a door frame, Then at that point, the guy I was dating, we started talking about me possibly moving in with him. So after that incident, I began to surreptitiously pack boxes of my things and start moving them out to his house. And then when they grounded me until I was 18, all of my stuff mostly was there. And I thought, I'm just going to go ahead. I was going to wait until I was 18 to move in with him, but it was 3 months away, and it just made sense to me at the time as a 17-year-old. So I just moved out.
Okay. After your junior year, then, did you just not go back to school? Is that?
Yeah, I turned 18 that summer. I got a job at another restaurant and began working there full time. I had bills to pay now, car insurance and credit cards and that kind of thing. So to me, it made more sense to work so I could support myself. And my boyfriend, he didn't have a job.
Okay. And what was your boyfriend's name?
His name was Bobby
What was his last name?
Juarez.
And Mr. Juarez, how old was he in relation to you?
He was 3 years older than me.
So he would have been out of school, I would assume?
Yes, he was out of high school.
And what did he do for a living?
He had never been employed at that point, so it was an isolated town we lived in, and it was difficult to obtain employment.
Okay. Well, let me ask you this, as it relates to Mr. Juarez. When did you meet him?
I first met him the first summer that I moved to Wairika when I was 15. The carnival comes to town, and so I was there with the girl I had mentioned that my mom introduced me to. Her and her sister, we were there. And I saw him walking in a crowd with a few other friends, and he caught my eye. It was very intriguing looking. He was kind of dressed like 18th century goth, kind of. He was.
Well, can you describe for some of us who may not follow that reference, just kind of describe what he was wearing? Maybe?
Yeah, it was like July or August when I met him, and it's in the maybe triple digits in the temperature. It's very hot. Wairika gets really hot, not quite like the desert, but in the triple digits in the summer. But this guy was dressed in a black suit and a high collar white shirt, and he was on crutches. He had long, dark, curly hair, and he just seemed intriguing to me, so I remember seeing him walk by, and I didn't approach him or anything, but I noticed him. So we spent the day there, my friends and I, walking around, and at one point they were getting in line for the zipper. I didn't want to get on the zipper. There was only 2 per cage anyway, so I was kind of the third odd one out. So I just stood next to the line waiting for them to go on the zipper and come back. But I was just looking around, and I caught his eye again, and he was looking right at me. And he motioned for me to come over. He went like that, and I didn't know if he was talking to me, so I kind of looked around and looked at him again, and he did it again. So I walked up to him, and he said, in a very kind way, he said, "Do you want to go?" Oh, sorry.
Sustained.
Let me ask you this without telling you what he said, and just to clarify a bit based on what you told us, he would have been around the age of 18 at this time, right?
Yes.
Okay. And you were 15. You meet him at a state fair.
Yes.
Thing. Okay. Tell us then, do you begin a relationship at that point in time, or just kind of describe for us how that relationship was at that time?
No, he invited me to go on the zipper with him, so we went on one ride with that and talked a little bit as we were flipping around, and after that we parted, and I didn't see him again for a while.
Okay. When did you see him again?
I think it was October, maybe November of that same year. I was at a homecoming football game for my high school, and I saw him again, and he was with some friends. And I was really shy, but I wanted to say hi to him, so I walked up to him and said, "Do you remember me?" And he said he remembered me. but he couldn't remember my name, so I told him. I didn't remember his name either. So we kind of reintroduced ourselves, and he said, "Tell me your phone number, and I promise I'll remember it." So I gave him the house phone, which was my parents' phone. We didn't have cell phones. And he remembered it and called me.
Did you begin dating at that time?
No, we were just friends. We talked for a while. We weren't dating.
Okay.
He was actually seeing a girl, I think. I don't remember.
Okay. So you were just friends for a period of time?
Yeah, several months we were just friends.
But you were telling us he became your boyfriend at that point, so I'm assuming there's some point in time that you two began dating.
Yeah, the girl broke up with him, and there was a period of time where he was single and I was single, and we started just talking more and more. And then I think it was on New Year's that year when I was a freshman, we decided to become boyfriend-girlfriend.
Okay. And then you said that was your the beginning of your sophomore year? Or?
I would have still been a freshman then.
Okay. And you said you were going to become boyfriend and girlfriend?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. You guys decided that. Was he still in high school at that point in time?
No, he was out of high school.
And to your recollection, was he working at that point in time?
No, he wasn't working.
Okay. Describe for us then what being boyfriend and girlfriend at that stage in your life meant for you and Mr. Juarez.
For us, I didn't have a car. I didn't have a driver's license yet. I think I was getting my permit that year. So he would come to town, and so during lunch, a lot of kids would leave campus, and there's a small gas station, USA gas station, near the high school. So I would walk down there, and he would be there. There was an arcade there, and he really liked video games, so we would meet there and just hang out, hold hands, that kind of thing.
Okay. How long at this point in time, did you date Bobby continuously from the time that you were 15 till you moved out of the home?
No, we stayed together for a while, and I think at age 15 I felt like the relationship was getting very intense. He was talking about being together forever, and I loved him, but I didn't feel like I was in love with him, and I knew at age 15 there's no way I could decide who I wanted to spend the rest of my life with at that point. So he wanted to move to San Francisco, and he had all kinds of wild ideas, they seemed fun, but they were just not where I was. So at that point I broke up with him.
What do you mean wild ideas?
Well, he entertained the belief in vampires, and he thought, well, let's go to San Francisco and see if we can find some real vampires. And, I used to read Anne Rice novels at the time. It didn't seem realistic to me, but it seemed like it was just an idea that I would go along with, with him.
And this was at a time when you were about 15 years of age. He wanted to move to San Francisco and hunt vampires,
Yeah.
right?
So we could live together forever and be together forever.
Was there a certain point in time then when this was going on and you said it was getting too intense for you? Did you and Mr. Juarez break up?
Yes. It was one afternoon. I broke up with him on the phone. I don't know where my parents were, but my Aunt Lisa was at the house. She was picking my brother and I up. I was having this conversation with him. He was very upset. And Lisa wanted us to leave. She wanted to take us. We had to go somewhere with her. So I didn't have time to stay on the phone with him for a long time and talk through it with him. So I had to sort of abruptly end the phone call shortly thereafter, and it was, I don't know, I guess he didn't take that well.
Okay. What do you mean by you guess he didn't take it that well?
I found out a few years later that he...
Objection, Pearson.
Approach. Overruled. You may continue.
Sorry, Ms. Ayers. I was described, we were asking, you said you understood that Mr. Juarez didn't take the breakup you had when you were about 15 so well. Describe for us what you mean by that.
I learned a few years later that he slit both of his wrists and tried to kill himself, and he was committed to some kind of psychiatric ward in Citrus Heights, just north of Sacramento.
Okay. Did you have, after this phone call where you broke up and you left the home, did you have any sort of relationship with him in between that and the well, let me ask you this way. It sounds like he was your boyfriend again about the time when you turned 18, right? A few months
Yes.
beforehand? Okay. How did that come about?
We didn't talk at that point for a few years. It's kind of silly. There was this older man that used to come into my parents' restaurant. I'd say he was in his 60s, maybe 70s, and he always had his Bible. And it was a small pocket version of the New Testament, and he had it all marked up, and he was always, quoting Bible scripture and things. And he had done the math in the Bible and determined that he knew when the second coming was going to occur. And he said it was going to occur September 23rd, 1997. So I was really naive, and I kind of believed him. So he would come in weekly or several times a week on my shift and continue to reiterate that. So, at the time I was non-denominational Christian, and this seemed important. So I thought that Bobby should know about it, because at the time he wasn't religious, and he was uncertain about his spirituality, at least when I last had known him. So to me it was important that he at least hear that information, so he could make a decision for himself. So I made contact with him again and called him.
Junior year? Or?
I was just starting my junior year.
Okay. And subsequent to this phone call, did you begin to remain a friendship with Mr. Juarez? Tell us about how that evolved.
Well, when I first called, he answered the phone. I could recognize his voice. And I said, "Is Bobby there?" And he said, "Yeah, who's this?" And I said, "Jodi." And I immediately heard her click. So I left it alone, and I thought, okay, because our last phone call some years back didn't end well. And so the next night I tried one more time, and the same thing happened. So I left it alone. And about...
Well, let me ask you this before we continue. You mentioned that Wairika was a pretty small town, right?
Yes.
Okay. You never ran into Mr. Juarez in between these two phone calls?
No, he didn't live in Wairika. He lived in Montague, which is 6 miles from Wairika. It's even smaller. I think there's about 1,000 people in that town.
Okay. But never during this time did you run into him at all?
No.
Okay. And I'm sorry, you had talked about you had called him a couple times. You hear the click on the other end of the phone. How does the relationship progress from that point?
I don't know how many days later. It was under a week, maybe 4 days, maybe 5 days. I was on the phone with a friend of mine, and we were talking, and I heard the call waiting beep, so I clicked over, and I heard someone say, "Is Jodi there?" And I recognized his voice, so I clicked back over and said, "I have to call you back." So I clicked back over, and we started talking again.
Okay. Did you, after that conversation, did you become friends again? Did you start dating again? Just describe that for us.
Yeah, I felt kind of silly explaining to him why I was calling him, especially knowing that his religious beliefs at that time were not really defined. And I kind of expected him to laugh at me, but it was important to me. So I told him the reason I was calling, and
Overruled. You may continue.
he expressed appreciation for that, which surprised me. We just sort of picked up from there and began talking again.
Does talking mean dating?
No, not yet.
Mr. Chairman, we're going to take the afternoon recess. Ladies and gentlemen, please be back in the designated area at 3:20. Please remember the admonition. You are excused.
All rise for the jury.
Thank you. Please be seated. Ms. Arias, please take the stand.
And Judge, regarding the conversation we had in the chamber, like I said, not knowing what it was about, I would point the court to State v. Machado, 226, Arizona, 281. It is the most recent case I could find dealing with the state asserting 403.
Can we switch very quickly?
You may. Any objection? 7th floor right now. As long as it takes him to get here from the 12th floor. Give me for a second.
This
I would
timeline?
say at this point it was early 2000, I think.
Okay, and at this point in time, Matt McCartney is your boyfriend?
Yes. Well, I don't remember us making it official, but we became romantic, and then we were boyfriend girlfriend.
Okay. Judge, this might be a good time.
Ladies and gentlemen, tomorrow morning, 10:30, please remember the admonition. Have a nice evening. You are excused. Please be seated. Counsel, anything before we adjourn for the day? All right. Have a nice evening. You may step in.
This
I would
timeline?
say at this point it was early 2000, I think.
Okay, and at this point in time, Matt McCartney is your boyfriend?
Yes. Well, I don't remember us making it official, but we became romantic, and then we were boyfriend girlfriend.
Okay. Judge, this might be a good time.
Ladies and gentlemen, tomorrow morning, 10:30, please remember the admonition. Have a nice evening. You are excused. Please be seated. Council, anything before we adjourn for the day? All right. Have a nice evening. You may step in.